Good evening to everybody and welcome to the 162nd edition of Vogan's Global Weather Report, live here from Mark Vogan Weather HQ. It is Saturday night. It is the 15th of November. We have Arctic air that is beginning to drift south, the first of the season. And is this a hint of bigger things to come later down the road? That is going to be the golden question. A very warm welcome if you are tuning in this evening. I'm going to, first and foremost, before I get into the live chat, let's play a couple of interesting videos. This is some of the extremes that have been taking place around not just the world, but just down the road in the Algarve in Portugal over the last 24 hours or so. So we're going to play a couple of videos to start with, and then we will get into the discussion for tonight's video. So stay tuned, and I hope you're enjoying some of this footage. This is the Albufeira region of Portugal. Significant tornado has unfortunately killed at least one British woman in the resort of Albufeira, Portugal. So I will play back the video and we'll discuss after watching it.
No explosive emergencies.
A devastating tornado struck the municipality of Albufeira in the Algarve region of Portugal on Saturday morning, November 15th, 2025, leaving 21 people injured, 3 seriously and 1 missing, a civil protection source said Saturday. It was a strong wind phenomenon, an extreme wind phenomenon, that affected 2 units, a campsite, and a hotel, said a source from the Regional Emergency Command and Civil Protection. At the Eden Hotel, 19 people were injured, 1 seriously, and at the campsite, 2 seriously injured and 1 missing, the source added. According to Civil Protection, the seriously injured were taken to Faro Hospital, and those with minor injuries were taken to the Albufeira Health Center. We continue to search for the missing. Several buildings were affected, several caravans in the campsite, as well as the roof of the hotel unit, were also hit and caused damage, Civil Protection stated. At both locations, 62 personnel and 25 vehicles were deployed, including the fire department, the National Republican Guard, GNR, the National Institute for Emergency Medical Services, INEM, and the Red Cross, with support from the Municipal Civil Protection. The Civil Protection declined to confirm whether the phenomenon was a tornado. The IPMA, Portuguese Institute of the Sea and Atmosphere, classified this event. We don't have that information yet. What we do know is that it was an extreme wind phenomenon, they concluded. In Faragudo, in the Lagoa region, a tornado also occurred on Saturday morning. This phenomenon, which occurred near a local campsite, caused numerous trees to fall and moved towards Lagoa.
So pretty unusual to see this level of damage actually in this part of the world. But this was, according to this video, this was today. So I don't know if anybody can confirm that. Good evening to Lindsay. Yes, I will see you soon. Lindsay is hard at work. Looking forward to getting her home fairly shortly. Good evening to William and to Catherine McKendry and Allness. Good evening to Paul James. First live stream for Brian Hunt. Good evening to yourself, my friend. I hope you enjoy the content that is on offer this evening. Yeah, there we go. That's it. Good evening to Mark Kinnish and good evening to City Andy as well. Hope everybody is having a good Saturday evening tonight and also next Saturday night. That will be when the live stream takes place. Thanks to Lindsay for the super thanks. It's very kind of you. Hope work is going well, not too busy. It looks as if it's not overly busy. The fact that you're on the live chat. So that is what has been taking place in Albufeira down in the Algarve of Portugal through the course of today, moving across the Atlantic to California, and some significant amounts of rain has been taking place. We will talk about the stratosphere. We will talk about the prospects of much colder conditions, perhaps as we head into the month of December. So yeah, I'm skipping even this current cold spell that is now in the evolution stage. We're starting to see the mild and the very, very wet conditions start to move eastwards. By the way, that tornado was spawned by Storm Claudia that obviously created very significant rainfall across parts of England and Wales over the last 24 hours or so. We've seen very unsettled conditions, disruptive weather down through the Canary Islands as well as obviously mainland Iberia. But then that system has had significant impacts up here across the UK as well. Massive contrast between Arctic air over Scotland, subtropical air to the south over the UK, across particularly southern portions of England and Wales. We've had that boundary that has created the enhanced precipitation along that boundary, and obviously you've got orographic lift, you've got easterly winds riding up the east, upslopes of Wales and southern England. That enhances the rainfall through orographic influence. When you cool condense, the atmosphere wrings out even more moisture than it already is doing. So quite an interesting situation that has evolved. It's been a very wet first half of November. Is that an omen of things to come? So stay tuned. Hit that like button. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already done so. And let's move on then to California, where we've seen significant amounts of rain over the last day or so, where an atmospheric river situation has evolved, streaming moisture off the Pacific and into the west coast of the United States. So stay tuned. Hope you can hear this very clearly.
Residents have been advised to take precautions immediately as that heavy rain continues to threaten Southern California through the weekend. Fox Weather meteorologist Bane Ferroni is in Malibu, California, under the evacuation.
Good evening to you. Can't do that. Trying to put on my best Scottish accent. You can't do that. Good evening to yourself. Good evening to Dr. Lord's Mental Health Matters. Frog's Legs Matthew, also good evening, and to Keith Fletcher, good evening to yourself.
Good mornings, Bane. We talked about this yesterday when you were on the ground, that folks in these neighborhoods that are still destroyed, recovering after the wildfires at the start of this year, they're on high alert, basically collecting the important belongings ready to go at a moment's notice.
Yeah, exactly, Jane. And, this morning it has been intense. I mean, the rain rates right now, they're going down pretty hard. I mean, they're a little bit on the lighter end of what we've seen in the past couple of hours. I mean, at one point we did see a really strong system that rolled in from the coast. I mean, we saw rain rates picking up nearly half an inch in 20 minutes. I mean, we had our own rain gauge and we were measuring it out. In our spot, specifically in Malibu, we got about 0.4 of an inch. And that was, again, within 20 to 25 minutes. Anywhere in the country, that is going to be an intense rain rate, but especially for here in California. Just because of the topography, usually a very dry area. And on top of this, too, like you mentioned there, Jane, talking about those burn scars, these areas that are so vulnerable already from the January fires. Now, before we jump into all of that, I do want to point out what's going on behind me because, this water continuing to flow down.
So basically, within the space of 20 minutes, they've received an inch of rain, which is pretty significant. Like she says, anywhere, but in Southern California in particular, and obviously we get the floodwaters, the runoff, landslides as a consequence as well.
At a pretty quick rate, and since we've been standing here for about an hour, this water has increased by double, honestly. And just about an hour ago, this roadway was actually undrivable because there was a small mudslide that occurred here, but thankfully crews were able to get to it very quickly. They cleared out all of the rocks that started to slide down as well as all of the mud, and they moved up the hill to continue to get all of those mudslides, impacts on the roads out of the way so that neighbors and people in the community can get in and out of this road. So a scary situation for a lot of folks, and we're currently in a neighborhood that was greatly impacted by the fires just this past January with those burns.
Okay, so we'll quickly skip on from that then. One of the more pressing weather stories over the last wee while or so was down in Brazil, where we seen a significant tornado. So, a bit of a theme going on here this evening, tornadoes and severe damage. This was down in Brazil, where this was the equivalent of an EF4 tornado. Look at the amount of damage that was caused. Let's play quickly through this video and see what they've got to say. This was from Al Jazeera English.
Entire lifetimes of work and memories gone in minutes. Residents of Rio Bonito do Iguaçu who survived the tornado that struck Friday night are thankful they escaped their lives.
There's not much we can do. Forgive me for crying. All we have left are our clothes and our documents. My livelihood, my mechanic shop, is gone. And my son worked with me. We'll ask God for strength and courage for the people, not just for me.
The wind came, swept me up and threw me against the grill. I tried to get up but fell again and hid under the bench where a metal sheet had fallen. I stayed there until it passed. When I came out, everything was destroyed. My daughter and my wheelchair-bound mother were inside. I was devastated. My father-in-law was inside too. In 2 minutes, everything was on the ground. Some people lost family, but we must thank God we're alive, that we didn't lose anyone. That's what matters the most.
The tornado's winds reached 250 kilometers an hour, causing injuries from flying debris.
It was a very sad and intense night. There were lives lost. Some patients remain in the ICU, and we are updating their medical status.
The Parana state government has declared 3 days of mourning and requested extra funds from the federal government for recovery efforts.
The work of the firefighters continues tirelessly in the search for victims, whether or not there are people buried. And thank God the firefighters have already done their part.
The disaster comes as world leaders are meeting in.
Don't miss out and get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news and expert insights.
Just look at the amount of damage.
Share. Stay ahead.
You're not a child.
Okay, so that was the scene in Brazil during the course of the past week. So yeah, pretty devastating stuff, it has to be said. So what has everybody been up to today? I actually took a little hill walk back up the local hill of Farish, which is I think it's around 2,300 feet above sea level. Beautiful clear sky, looking down over the Cormorty Firth and the local towns and communities. You can actually see the lights over the Black Isle and into the Inverness area as well. So fantastic, good to get out and about, get a little bit of a stretch of the legs. Got the old head torch on as well. I must admit, it is a little bit creepy. It's been a long time since I've done any walking in the middle of nowhere in the darkness. So yeah, it was an interesting experience, and just trying to get myself a little bit fitter and healthier, I suppose, as well. So that was quite enjoyable this afternoon. Also, before that, did some grocery shopping with my good lady, and it has been a fairly productive day, a decent day. But has everybody been? What have you been up to? I'd be curious to know. So, good evening to David Kennedy. Nice to see a few new names popping up on the live chat. Will we get into the stratospheric situation? Before we do get into that, let's quickly go on to Weather Belt and see what the temperature anomalies are looking for the month of November so far. I did notice that Matthew was saying about being a typical mild and drizzly day down. I'm assuming he's down south. But yep, t-shirt weather actually, Matthew is saying. Yep, that is about to change, Matthew, over the next several days. Even for folks like Paul down in Hampshire, we're going to be getting the Arctic dropping down over the UK. You know, I look back at that month of November last year, and it really was quite mind-boggling. You know, to see temperatures upwards of 19 Celsius in parts of Ireland. We did see London's warmest November day for the middle of November on record back a couple of days ago. We've seen big contrast, temperatures barely above freezing in parts of the north, while we had 18, even 19 Celsius, or close to it anyway, across the south. Obviously, the very significant rainfall in between that boundary. So some very interesting contrast over the last 24 to 48 hours or so. But we are going to see the Arctic sinking south. I refer back to the November of last year, where we've seen very mild conditions. The big difference with last year and this year is last November was actually quite dry. This time around, it's very different. But to me, there's shades of 2010, even 2009 showing up with the very mild and very wet pattern. And Joe Bastardi back, several years ago referred to a very wet spell during the month of November. That's where the cold wants to go as we head towards the winter season. And I am leaning very strongly towards a cold December based on what's taking place up in the stratosphere. We're going to see the mean zonal winds really drop out. Whether we actually see the reversal or not remains to be seen. But, nevertheless, fascinating to see at this time of the year the winds becoming so weak surrounding the polar vortex, seeing strong warming taking place. We're seeing high latitude blocking, which is creating an expansion of the troposphere, which is where our weather resides, and it's shrinking the stratospheric level, which is above the troposphere. When you expand the troposphere, you contract the stratosphere and you heat it up. And there is a possibility that we see the cold that is typically within the stratospheric polar vortex. It typically starts to descend downwards through the atmosphere. And as a result of that, it can lead to Arctic outbreaks down in the middle latitude pattern. But let's quickly and first and foremost look at temperature anomalies globally, and then we will move into the meat and bones of the stratospheric discussion. So let's look at the equatorial view. Look at current temperatures across the world from an anomaly standpoint, and this is how it's looking through today, Saturday the 15th of November. And again, that usual mixture of warm versus cool and average across Africa, across through the Arabian Peninsula. We've got a largely cooler than average. Further north, up into Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, into Turkey, pretty much all of Europe, we're talking about warmer than average. India, interestingly, continuing to run that below average signal there into Pakistan, Afghanistan, Kyrgyzstan. Western China is colder than average. Much of Australia is colder than average. Eastern China, incidentally, warmer than average. Both Mongolia and Kazakhstan largely warmer than average. We're knocking the door of minus 50 in parts of Siberia. We'll look at that in a second as well. Much of North America away from the eastern United States is warmer than average. Much of Greenland warmer than average. We're seeing coastal communities, including the capital Nuuk, has been seeing some very mild temperatures, not getting below freezing even during the overnight period on the west coast of Greenland. That is due to that anomalous ridge of high pressure over the top of this part of the world. But you can see here, if we look at Europe specifically, firmly warmer than average. Be interesting to see the upcoming 10 days or so, how much we chip away at that warm anomaly. Looking back again at the global view, we're seeing largely warmer than average Brazil, northern Argentina, as well as Peru. We're seeing below average conditions here. So let's move on then. In terms of rainfall over the last 72 hours, this is how it's looking according to Meteoseal. So we've seen not a great deal of rain across the far north of the UK and also the far south and southeast. not a great amount, but they get yourself into the Midlands, parts of South Wales, Central Wales. We're talking about some significant rainfall over the last couple of days or so, and that extends all the way through to the Central Belt. Even Highland Perthshire, for example, seeing a decent amount of rain over the last. This is only obviously over the last 3 days or so. Good evening to our very own Gavin Partridge. Haven't seen you in a while, my friend, but it is nice to see you tuning in, and hope you're enjoying your weekend. So, yep, that is the rainfall over the last 72 hours. This is the current temperatures in, and chilly enough, it has to be said, across the north. We're currently talking minus 1.8 at Loch Liscarnock, but get yourself further south. Mid-single figures down across central and southern Scotland, northern England, then further south still through the Midlands, we're generally 8 to about 10 Celsius. Far south of the UK, we're still holding on to the 10, 12, 13 Celsius range. If we look at the temperatures from yesterday, maximum temperatures that is, a little bit less in the way of chill up here across the north. I think here just missed out on about 10 Celsius during the course of yesterday afternoon. So that was up from the 6 Celsius that we received the day before, but 7.3 at Aviemore. Still holding on to about 13 to 16 Celsius right along the south coast. But the Arctic air is driving south. And if we look quickly at tropical tidbits and look at the temperature anomalies of the GFS model here, you can see quite clearly how this is panning out. So these are the temperature anomalies then, and this was through the course of today. So largely warmer than normal away from, from the central belt south, much of Ireland warmer than average also. But then you can see here that the cold begins to descend. Very warm air now shifts into the eastern and southeastern portions of Europe. Continue to play through, and you notice here we're firmly in the colder than average. Now we notice here that there's going to be nights this upcoming work week with clear skies, light winds, Arctic air in place, and the possibility of some snow in the ground. We could be talking about temperatures double digits below freezing. So the cold is coming, albeit folks in the south are probably saying this is hyped up. Where's the cold air? We're not going to get it, blah, blah, blah. I totally understand that, but the cold air is coming in. How severe the cold air is remains to be seen, but it looks as if it's going to hold through at least next weekend, and then we may start to see warmer temperatures, or at least the cold moderate. You can see that by the time we reach the end of next week, there is a chance of seeing something milder coming into play. So that is that. I want to show you the stratospheric situation here. This is total precipitation, by the way, over the last 10 days or so, and substantial amounts of rain. In terms of the precipitation anomaly, you can see that we're actually drier than average in the West Highland region, but even up here in Marthawood weather territory, we're around about average, slightly wet than average up into Caithness and Sutherland, and also across to Aberdeenshire. Then from the central belt south, wetter than average. Much of Ireland and the Northern Ireland is wetter than average. If we put on the Reading charts here, this is through the 15th. This is quite interesting. In terms of temperature anomalies, we're talking, plus 2 Celsius, even plus 3 Celsius up at Wick. This is for the month to date, by the way. But there are some parts of England that is, over 5 Celsius warmer than average through the first half. So we're right on the middle point of November. 5 degrees above average through the first 15 days of the month is pretty incredible. So this month's likely to be warmer than average overall. I think it would take a lot to get back even close to average through the second half of the month. We kind of did that last November, but I don't know whether we're going to get the same extremity of precipitation or temperature, cold, that is, sorry. I was thinking about something else just at the same time as I was talking there, but whether we get, I don't think we're going to get close to average. I think we're going to be above average overall. But these are the rainfall percentages for November so far. And we're already above the average for the whole of November. Remember, we've got the second half of the month still to go. And it's interesting to see, 105%, 103% on the Isle of Man, 114 and 115%, 147% down across the south of Ireland here. Looks as if we're running quite low compared to average down in the southeast of the UK here. And then up into the north, we're generally, remember, we've still got the second half of the month. So sitting on 76% of normal around Lossiemouth and Kinloss area. That's reasonably high, 50%. So you're bang average in the Loch Liscarnock area. You're running above average based on the fact that you've still got the second half of November still to go. But very interesting to see how wet this November is turning out to be. And the reason why I'm talking about this wetter than average November is I'm going to show you this right now from our very own Richard Trott, because I just need to pull up the appropriate tweet. So just bear with me a little second here. Sorry about this, folks. I'm trying to find out. By the way, that's quite a cool little gift there showing here at the house. It was 20. I think we've had 20 straight days of measurable precipitation, but it was drier than it was dry yesterday. So therefore, it has actually ended that streak of wet, continuous wet days, day after day. And I'm sure folks down further south across the UK are probably saying absolutely sick and tired of the rain. So let me see here, struggling to pull up the appropriate tweet. So keep in mind what I was saying there with regards to the fact that we're running pretty wet for this November. There is elements of this that reminds me of 2010, even 2009, for example. But this is, again, I want to reiterate this. I was obviously talking about this back during the course of the work week on the European outlooks. But these are wet Novembers followed by cold Decembers. So 1950 wet November, December 1950 very cold with a CET of 1.2 Celsius with several snowy spells, the second coldest in the century after 81. 1952 was a wet November followed by a cold December, overall mostly cold with a CT of 2.8. 1962 wet November, cold December of 62 with a CT of 1.8. 1981 was a wet November, but a very cold December. Wonderful month if you like snow and cold. The coldest of the 20th century, 0.1 CT, and a very snowy one as well. 1995, that's the last time the UK challenged the all-time UK cold record of minus 27. We got there. It was at the very tail end of December of 95. Remember, Glasgow hit minus 20. The trains weren't running due to frozen diesel. And that was when we lived over in Fife at the time. And I can remember that, actually. But that November of 95 was very wet, followed by the coldest December since 81 with a CT of 2.1. Then 1996. So what's interesting about that wet November and a very easterly December with a CT of 2.8. 1996 is interesting because the Indian Ocean dipole is the most negative since 1996 this year, which is quite interesting. East QBO, weak polar stratosphere. Yeah, interesting stuff. 2010, there we go. Wet November, and it was an exceptional December. December to remember, with a CT of minus 0.7. It was the coldest December since 1890. So, lots of examples of warm and wet beginnings to November, followed by cold spells that followed. I'll finish off by sharing this little bit at the bottom. Another interesting thing I see here is that two occurred in the 1950s, two occurred in the 1990s, which was the most notable snowless winters as we got to the 2000s, which means we are due another number 2 Decembers of a similar nature followed in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, or 2010-2019 period. Only the 50s and 90s so far. So 2025, question mark, let's see what happens. Now, with regards to the stratosphere, let's have a look at the polar stratosphere. Also, before I forget let me just show you some of the things that have been taking place in terms of the United States, because we obviously had Arctic air that swept southwards during the course of the week just gone. They've obviously replaced it with much milder conditions. But we did see temperatures dropping as low as 24 Fahrenheit, which is around about, -5 Celsius down in the state of Florida, North Florida. Mississippi, 21, which is around -6 Celsius. Alabama, 19, which is about -7. Georgia, this is testing my conversion between Celsius and Fahrenheit. But, Georgia, 18 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about -8, if memory serves me correct. Maryland and Pennsylvania down to 16, which is about -10. Tennessee, 15 Fahrenheit. North Carolina and Virginia, 13, and West Virginia, 11. So we got into double figures below freezing in parts of the interior United States during the course of the early portions of this working week. We also seen even temperatures down into Key West, which is the most southern point on the continental United States. They dropped down to 57 Fahrenheit, which doesn't sound like a lot. That's about, 14 Celsius. But for Key West, which is subtropical or even tropical, that is significant, especially for the month of November. Tied a record for the coldest so early in the season. Ties 4 other dates, 66, 55, and 13. Let's quickly move on then, because I'm not necessarily conscious of time. Even down in Atlanta, we're seeing snow flurries. New York City seeing snow flurries as well. Big contrast. I want to show you this as well. Big contrast between the southeast United States and the Caribbean. While the Caymans and also Turks and Caicos, overnight minimums of 25 and 26 Celsius. We're talking about 9.4 in Miami, 7.2 in Fort Lauderdale. Couldn't remember there, Fort Lauderdale, and then -1 and -2 at Tallahassee and Jacksonville, North Florida, respectively. Let me just see here. We did also see significant amounts of snowfall in parts of the Midwest, upwards of 18 inches or 45.7 centimeters of snow fell in parts of Michigan. 14 inches of snow fell also at Little Point Sable Lighthouse in Michigan. 14 also in Indiana, and 13.5 in Michigan as well. Upwards of 6 inches fell in Chicago, which is quite interesting. This is all the areas that received snowfall during the past week. Like I say, temperatures have warmed up quite substantially over the past several days or so. So, down in, across, should I say, in Russia, we're knocking the door of -50 Celsius. Some record-breaking cold even down into China. Temperatures the first -40s of the season now in the far north of China. Obviously, the north of China can get bitterly cold during the course of the winter season. Obviously, they're a neighbour to Siberia just to the north. Also in Mongolia, we've seen temperatures down to -36.3 Celsius in recent days. While we're talking about the big contrast across the UK, France recorded its hottest November day on record a few days ago, where we've seen temperatures reach 29.8 Celsius. So very, very impressive warmth down in France. That is about to change, of course, with the cold air coming southbound here. So let me see here. Let's move on to the stratospheric situation then. Quite a lot to try and get through, so that's why I'm perhaps stumbling and stuttering my way through this evening. I do apologise about that. But let's have a look at the stratosphere and see what is going on. Let's have a look at the northern hemispheric view, and we are going to be seeing a significant deceleration in the winds at 10 millibars at 60 degrees north within the northern hemisphere. This could potentially be the first November sudden stratospheric warming since 1968, which would be quite interesting. Now, if we play through this is off weatherbell.com. This is temperatures at 10 millibars, or the upper levels of the stratosphere, and the anomaly. So you can see here this warming showing up here from Siberia across into eastern Siberia, across into northwestern North America. Play through this. This is off the GFS, by the way. Look at this strong burst of warming now starting to show up. Look at that there. And that would be certainly close, if not a full-blown sudden stratospheric warming. Isn't that pretty cool? Now, it has to be said that just because you get a sudden stratospheric warming does not guarantee cold in Western Europe, including the UK and Ireland. Equally, you don't have to get a major sudden stratospheric warming where the winds reverse from westerly to easterly to get a significant cold spell in western portions of Europe, including the UK and Ireland here. So either way, this weakness of the polar vortex, let's have a quick look at the mean zonal winds according to the ECMWF. Let's update this graphic. And you can see here that we are now the ECM mean run here. So this is the combination of all 51 members, actually showing slightly above the zero line, which is, we've got perhaps a 50-50 chance of those winds reversing at 10 millibars. But nevertheless, we're in record weak territory for this time of the year. That is likely to have impacts on the troposphere into the month of December. And this process is well underway, and it's going to be very interesting to see how all this pattern plays out. Now, remember, like I said, you can get the release of cold into the middle altitudes, but we could be stuck under high pressure and we don't actually see cold. Cold goes to the west, cold goes to the east, and we don't get there. The finer details, folks, is going to be critical as to exactly where the high and the ridge and the trough, sets up, positions itself. That is going to be critical. But let's have a quick look then at some of the model runs here and see where the models suggest the ridging and the troughs are going to align. Now, if we look at the upper heights, this is the upcoming 7 days. According to the GFS extended, and you can see here we've got this nice block over Greenland. We've got the trough from Scandinavia undercutting across Europe down into the southwest of Europe here. If we look at Europe specifically, you've got that. That is a cold look. That is an easterly look with that block, that ridge of high pressure up towards Iceland and Greenland here. Play back out. So let's look quickly at the northern hemispheric view once again. And let's play through this and see what it shows. You can see here, again, we're continuing with this blockiness. We've got a ridge to the west, perhaps southwest of the UK and Ireland. We've got the trough over Europe. We've got the ridge over Greenland, the Arctic extending into North America here. This is the period day 8 through 15 of the GFS ensemble, Saturday the 22nd through the 29th of November here. I want to say something here that we could essentially pull out of this chilly theme through the next 7 days. We could pull out of that. But with the Mann-Julian oscillation going into the cold phases in combination with the weakness in the polar vortex and the mean zonal winds surrounding that, there is a bit of an alignment starting to show up with regards to this December. And you can see here, this is the period ending November and into the early portions of December. You've got all the blocking up into the Arctic region. That's your negative AO and negative NAO signal with negatives here. We've actually got a negative over Western North America with a ridge over the East Coast. That's actually a mild theme for Eastern United States, cold for the West. You've got a negative here east of Newfoundland. But you can see here this trough over Europe, including the UK and Ireland, and that's quite an interesting look. Continue to play through, and notice here the persistence in that ridge over the Arctic region. That is creating that frictional effect from troposphere up into the stratosphere. That's why the mean zonal winds are becoming so weak. We're seeing the response from bottom up, and it looks as if that region is persistent right the way through much of December. Look at this here. Play through it. That's an interesting look, folks, isn't it? And let's put on the 30-day anomaly and see what it's indicating. That is an exciting one if you like snow and cold, I must admit. Let's look at Europe then, specifically for the next 30 days. So this is the period 14th through 14th. November 14th through December 14th. That's how the upper synoptic looks. If we look at the temperature anomalies through the next 30 days, colder than average. Let's have a look at the weeklies. Colder than average, albeit not intense, but cold than average nonetheless. So we'll wait and see what happens as we move forward here. Elif, I probably pronouncing that wrong, and I apologise. The New Year snowstorm in 78-79 was funny here in Denmark. So, yep, Nathan Richardson, good evening to yourself. And Fed Up Brit, good evening to yourself as well. Remember to hit that subscribe button, folks, because there is going to be a lot more in the upcoming European outlooks. I am beginning to build the winter forecast. So exciting times here if you are a lover of winter like myself and like many of you here on this channel. So, yeah, certainly fascinating stuff going on. Now, incidentally, that the last time we seen a November major southern stratospheric warming, this is how December looked according to the reanalysis here. So we had region extend from Hudson Bay across Greenland, Iceland, into Scandinavia, with a deep negative extending right the way across coast to coast across the United States and across Europe here in particular. So the last time we seen a November SSW, this was how the synoptic looked in terms of kind of pull up. This is a little test here because Richard is usually fantastic at sending me these charts, but I'm trying my best to learn for myself. Probably not doing a great job, but nevertheless, let's have a look and see if I can pull up the Europe view in terms of the synoptic back in December of 68. So this is the December following that southern stratospheric warming that took place in November, and that is the last time we've seen that taking place. But with the La Nina, East QBO, negative IOD, and a weak polar vortex, there is strong signals for a cold December. Like I said, there's no guarantee, but nevertheless, interesting stuff. This is the Europe view, by the way, of December of 68, and that's quite interesting to see. Let me see here. I want to show you another thing. This is from Ethan Sakaransky, based in Canada. Interesting to note some striking similarities between the current pattern and that of November, December 2000. I remember that very well, actually. My late brother actually passed away back in the November of 1999. I went over and spent Christmas with my grandparents over in Northern Ireland, and I remember the deep snow at Christmas on the ground in Northern Ireland, down in the Bestbrook Newry area, and I remember that was quite a notable winter, actually, especially up across the north, I think, of the UK. But 2001 is quite a big analogue for this year. La Nina, we had an East QBO. Another aspect that needs to be taken into consideration is the solar cycle as well, which Rich is much more knowledgeable than I am with regards to that. But that's getting built into the forecast as well. But nevertheless, there's a lot of teleconnections that are matching up with 2001. And Ethan says that, interesting note, similarities to 2000, November and December. That year also featured the downwelling of an East QBO phase, which coincided with a weak La Nina event and culminated in a major stratospheric warming in late November, followed by a frigid December. So this was the 30 millibar level within the Arctic region. You can see a lot of warming showing up here. Similarities showing up here to this year, which is quite interesting stuff. So, I'm not going to end just yet, but be sure to hit that like button and also hit the subscribe button, folks, if you're excited about the prospects of wintry conditions, not just this upcoming week, but into the month of December as well. Let me see here if I can show a couple of other elements here. In terms of the Arctic Oscillation, North Atlantic Oscillation, negative Arctic Oscillation and North Atlantic Oscillations tend to lead to colder weather, quite often in Western Europe here, but certainly pockets of the mid-latitudes sees some significant cold. This is the NAO. Notice here that we are dipping into firm negative territory. We go back towards neutral. The green line is the mean of all the members, all the runs. You notice here that we go back towards neutral around about the time that the PV and the winds really, drop off. But you notice here the trend as we move into the month of December goes back into negative territory and remains that way. This is the NAO. So the negative NAO suggests blocking up towards Greenland and Iceland, more of a negative, more of a trough down towards the Azores and Iberia. This is the Arctic Oscillation, incidentally, off the ECM extended. You can see here again, like the NAO, we go back towards positive and then back into negative territory. Let me just show other things here. This is an interesting post as well from, I think this was from James Peacock. Major sun-stratospheric warmings, dates and types on record back to 1958. Vast majority are within January and March, while the earliest on record was the 20th of November 1968. Current forecast guidance suggests 2025 may see on the 26th of November a new record of it if it happens. And back in 68 we also had an easterly QBO that was achieved in the 28th of November. It says the 27th here. We also seen one in 1958, a major southern stratospheric warming, a displacement. Remember, types of SSW can be important as well. You've got the stretching PVs, which sometimes when they link up between eastern Russia across the top and into North America, that sometimes leads to more active jet across the Atlantic and actually storminess into Western Europe here. So there's different flavors and varieties. That is something that I'm going to be focusing on over the next couple of weeks as I continue to build my winter ideas and my winter forecast. Want to just touch briefly on the possibility of La Nina, which we're going to have through the first half of this winter, transition to neutral and then into El Nino territory as we move into the spring and early summer of next year. What's interesting about that possibility is that while we've had quite wet conditions over the last couple of weeks, the year still remains largely drier than average. And I believe that La Ninas tend to favour drier conditions across the UK, Ireland and Western Europe. El Nino, on the other hand, I think tends to lead to wetter conditions. In 2023 saw an El Nino and we've seen some very wet conditions that year. And I think what we're going to see is potentially warmer than average for, say next spring, and into summer, but potentially a wetter summer next year. And that's something that I'm kind of looking towards with regards to our weather down the road here. So, we're going to look at the prospect of El Nino redeveloping in the equatorial Pacific during the spring of next year and the prospects that may have. I just wanted to touch on that at the back half of tonight's stream. So certainly a lot of things going on here, folks. Exciting times if you love winter. Obviously, there is people out there that are less fortunate than most of us, struggle to pay the bills and whatnot. We're obviously very mindful of that. That winter, a lot of people don't like it. You've also got the frail, the infirm. You get icy conditions, but people become afraid to go out and about. We have to take that into consideration as well. So we're obviously mindful of that, but certainly I think certainly the first half of this winter is looking quite cold, and how severe that cold is going to be remains to be seen. But certainly, I'll be continuing to monitor this situation going forward, and we'll watch this pattern evolve. The MJO is something that I've not really made mention too much about in tonight's stream. I will make more mention about that coming up, because it looks as if it's heading into that prime cold phase. There's a lot of things kind of lining up. MJO, that polar vortex, East QBO, La Nina, negative IOD, etc., etc. This is the upcoming 5 days, according to the GFS Ensemble, colder than average for the UK and Ireland. The 6 through 10, colder than average. Look at Western Europe. You can almost draw a line right down the middle. Cold than average in the west, warm than average east, particularly southeast of Europe here. And then the 11 to 15 day, interestingly, we do start to see a recovery taking place. But I think we're going to reinforce that colder potentially as well. Let's have a quick look. I will round up here now in a second. But here now in a second, that's a bit of a contradiction, isn't it? Let's have a look at the global temperatures. And we'll end with this here, because we are building the cold across the northern hemisphere, and we are beginning to see that cold descend into the middle altitudes as well. So we've warmed things back up across much of the lower 48 of the United States. Chillier across the north of North America, but nothing exceptional. It has to be said. Bear in mind, this is during the daytime, so temperatures are obviously warmer. Mid-30s, mid-minus 30s in a few spots, minus 20s. But if we skip over to Russia, we are beginning to see that reservoir gather strength. And what's interesting about this, by the way, so we're talking about mid-minus 40s, even upper minus 40s. What's interesting is, given what is happening within the stratosphere, we've already developed a reservoir of potent cold air. And if we start to see that cross-polar flow taking place, attributed to the stratospheric warming, for example, the building of pressure up into the high latitudes, then drains that cold into the middle latitude pattern, we have got potent cold to tap into. Could we see a beast from the east? Potentially in the month of December. That's possible. A link of high pressure from Hudson Bay, Greenland, across to Scandinavia. Easterly winds underneath. Remember, if there is that major southern stratospheric warming, if it takes place 23rd, 24th, 25th of November, you generally talk 2 weeks after that. But I think with an MJO in phases 7 potentially, you have that prolonged opportunity for cold weather within the middle altitude pattern. But it's all very much fair and balanced. I'm not hyping this up. I'm telling you the reasons behind why I think a certain thing is going to take place here. Good evening to James as well, and to other folks. I do apologise if I've not answered too many questions. I'm conscious a little bit about time. The reasons why is Scotland are playing Greece. Very important game between this game in Athens and the home match at Hampden Park against Denmark. Scotland could qualify for the World Cup. So I'm wanting to go and watch that. I don't get the opportunity much to watch football these days due to work and night shift. But I hope you've enjoyed the content here on Vogan Weather on the live stream. We will revisit this next Saturday night at the same time, 7 p.m. And we'll talk more about that, talk more about the extremes taking place around the world as well. Hope everybody is having a good weekend. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday night. Thanks very much to Richard Trott, to Chris A, Frogs Legs Matthew, to James, the City Andy, Mark Kinnish, and also thanks to the moderators as well, to Paul James, to Lindsay for tuning in, albeit for a brief spell, to Luca, thanks for tuning in as well. Like I said, I do apologise if I've not had the chance to give you much of an answer to any questions or comments, so that's unfortunate. Thanks to Dandy as well, Fed Up Brit, for tuning in, to Brian Hunt, to Nathan Richardson, Elof, hopefully that's the right pronunciation, and to Gav's Weather Vids as well for tuning in. I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. Gavin Partridge, Turbo Stream as well. So, yep, that is it for tonight. 83 concurrent viewers. Hit that like button before you leave tonight's stream. And also, more importantly, hit that subscribe button as well. Lots to come. Keep it right here. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Bye for now.